The U.S. and Israel carrying out an unprecedented mission, effectively decapitating Iranian leadership in one of the largest military operations in modern warfare history.
Looming questions over the future of Iran this morning, with the country and its longstanding regime on edge after the Ayatollah and 40 other leaders eliminated in what we believe was one strike in broad daylight.
Jennifer Griffin joining us right now with some of the stunning details from the mission, plus new details we're just learning. Jennifer.
Griff, we've just been able to confirm that it was the CIA that provided the intelligence to the Israelis that led to that strike that allowed the Israelis to drop 30 missiles on the compound of the supreme leader, Ali Khamenei. That was the strike that led to the death of 40 top leaders of Iran. But we have just been able to confirm that report that was first seen in the New York Times. Now, Iranian media is reporting the former Iranian president Mahmoud Ahmadinejad was killed in a strike on his home yesterday, where he was being kept under house arrest for allegedly plotting a coup. You'll remember him as the fiery Iranian leader who first shocked the world by saying openly around 2005 that Israel should be, quote, wiped off the map. We have not been able to confirm the report of his death, but we did report yesterday that his home was targeted in a joint U.S.-Israeli strike, and now it appears as if Ahmadinejad may be no more. Now, well-placed sources I've spoken to suggest the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps was given pre-firing orders in the event of a decapitation strike or strike on the command and control of the IRGC's chain of command. The head of the IRGC was killed yesterday in that strike on the Supreme Leader's compound. But the missiles we see likely are the result of those decentralized orders having been given in advance. The Iranians are not going down without a fight, however. They have fired 137 missiles and 209 drones at the United Arab Emirates, at civilian buildings there, at hotels, 66 missiles at Qatar, and 45 at Bahrain, along with 9 drones. In fact, in downtown Bahrain, the Crown Plaza Hotel was struck. Hotels and civilian apartment buildings are being hit by these missiles and drones in the neighboring Gulf states, not just being targeted are U.S. military bases. Missiles have been fired at a U.S. military base in Erbil, Iraq, however, likely by Shia militias in Iraq who have long been funded by the IRGC. A mob tried to storm the U.S. embassy in Baghdad, and Pakistani security forces used batons and live fire to push back an angry crowd threatening the U.S. consulate in Karachi, Pakistan. Both Iraq and Pakistan have large Shia Muslim populations, and British Defense Secretary John Healey said 2 ballistic missiles had been fired towards Cyprus, where the British Army has service members stationed. Likely those missiles were fired, I've learned, from Tabriz in western Iran, but it's the first time Cyprus has been targeted. The Israeli defense minister announced that Israel is now using stand-in weapons as opposed to stand-off weapons over Tehran, and will now have 24/7 air presence in the skies above Tehran. That means, in effect, that they believe that they and the U.S. military have effectively suppressed the air defense systems, or IADs, over Tehran. That's a huge step forward in terms of being able to track the movements of Iranian leaders and forces. In terms of the U.S. operation yesterday, the U.S. military carried out 900 strikes in 12 hours. The Israelis carried out 1,200 strikes in the past 24 hours, more than during the entire 12-day war last summer. In fact, the Israeli Air Force just took out 2 Iranian fighter jets preparing to take off on the tarmac from Tabriz in western Iran. Multiple sources tell me that the start of the operation had to be moved up based on intelligence and this, quote, target of opportunity, that meeting at Khamenei's compound. And as we mentioned, the New York Times was the first to report that the intelligence came from the CIA and who passed it to the Israelis, and those 30 Israeli missiles then were dropped on the compound. In Tehran, following the announcement of the supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, There were spontaneous outbursts of celebration on the one hand, but also some crowds chanting in downtown Tehran, "Death to America." Not clear if these were spontaneous or organized protests, but you can assume that the remnants of the regime and IRGC will want to present a united front, suggesting the regime will survive. The man to watch is Ali Larijani, the head of Iran's Supreme National Security Council. He has now moved into the top position of power in Iran. He just gave an interview in which he threatened revenge for the killing of Khamenei and the members of his family, the defense minister and head of Iran's armed forces. He said, quote, "The United States and the Zionists have burned the heart of the Iranian people, and we will burn their hearts." Right now, I'm watching carefully the Strait of Hormuz. The Iranians said they had closed the strait. That's not true. They fired on an oil tanker that it appears was actually one of their own shadow fleet. The Skylight actually had an Indian and Iranian crew. 150 ships, however, have anchored outside the strait, likely applying for supplemental insurance before entering the strait. The U.S. military watching carefully for any signs the strait is being mined by the IRGC Navy. The Iranians use civilian vessels, of course, to hide their activities in the straits and could use them as cover to drop mines if they feel the regime is on the verge of collapse. Griff?
You know, Jennifer, let's go back just because if the reports are true that Mahmoud Ahmadinejad has been eliminated, that's pretty significant when you consider, I mean, he had fiery speeches here in New York at the United Nations, but of course we do know that at his time of being in power, he was helping supply many of those IEDs that were killing our soldiers in Iraq.
His killing would be largely symbolic. It certainly would be justice for his role in those IEDs, the EFPs that were sent to Iraq and maimed and killed U.S. soldiers and Marines. But he had been largely marginalized within Iran. In fact, he was under house arrest, we understand, from last summer because the current leadership didn't trust him. They thought he might be planning a coup, or that was the excuse that they had him under house arrest.
And so now you have Ali Larijani, who has perhaps the biggest target on his back in human history at the moment.
I would say anyone rising up through the ranks has a huge bullseye on their back. They will certainly know this, but we've seen from the Israeli actions against Hezbollah in Lebanon and elsewhere that they usually come back in, and as soon as they have the intelligence, they would likely strike and try and take out that next leadership layer. But right now, Ali Larijani, he is a brutal leader. He was behind a lot of the most brutal suppression of the protests in December and January. He is vicious, and he's by no means a reformer or someone the U.S. can do a deal with.
Jennifer, you've been following military missions for a long time. You've seen extraordinary success under this administration, whether it was the removal of Maduro last summer. Operation Midnight Hammer was, amazingly done, very precise. Based on what you're seeing now, and I know it's only been 24 hours, the president has promised that this said this should be a couple-week war or engagement. Do you believe that he can contain this to 2 weeks, especially as we're seeing, other nations in the Gulf getting hit, but also engaging? Will that keep it contained? Is that helpful in keeping it contained? Just help us work through that, because I think in terms of political support and public support for this, keeping it contained must be really important for the president right now.
Well, I do know that there are certain off-ramps that the president has been given that he could take at any time to take the U.S. military out of this operation. I believe that this will likely go on for weeks. And in terms of the success, I think it's premature to describe it as successful, except to say that, of course, the military in the first 24 hours has performed flawlessly. No U.S. casualties. None of the U.S. bases have really suffered any sort of real damage. They've had good air missile defense systems in place. They did incredible planning in terms of drawing down forces and military equipment at those bases in the Gulf. And so what they are accomplishing with the Israelis, and certainly with that intelligence that took out the top leadership and the supreme leader of Iran, is, bar none, will be studied for some time. The question is what comes afterwards and whether they are able to achieve the goal of removing the regime and actually starting a fresh day in Iran where they are able to take control, or whether this descends into a civil war and spreads chaos to the region, whether the rest of the region gets engulfed in war. I think that is really a question mark, because this, as we've seen with many conflicts, the situation against Maduro and in Venezuela, and the very narrow, very elegant, if you will, strikes against the nuclear program last summer are very different. Right. They were very limited in scope. This is opening up, as you know, with war, a Pandora's box, and we just don't know how it ends.
Yeah.
Jennifer, thank you so much. You've been great all morning, and we will be relying on you the rest of the day and in the days to come. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jen.
Thank you.